Okay, disclaimers. I'm not a speaker. I'm a writer. I'm speaking because I believe now it's necessary that all of us speak up in any way that we are able. If you agree with what I have to say, if it resonates with you, tell me. If you don't agree with what I have to say, tell me. Provided you can do so reasonably, rationally, and logically. If you disagree and cannot do so reasonably, rationally, and logically, shut up. Your argument is with you, not me. Ask yourself why you believe something that is unreasonable, irrational, and illogical. That's your issue, not mine. I am on Facebook, Oliver Smith, and I am an ex-vaxxer. I know what you're thinking. How could I have believed in something so anti-science as vaccination? Do I not believe in science? Don't I need evidence to believe in something? How could I believe in something that goes against the evidence? Was I delusional? Was I mentally ill? These are all valid questions. These are fair questions. These are questions that need due consideration, and these are questions that need answers. How did I believe in something that goes against the evidence, that is in fact contradicted by the evidence? Well, this isn't a man I'd usually go to for quotes. Predominantly I consider Richard Dawkins to be a sophist and prevaricator, and frankly not very good at either. But I would predominantly agree with him on this quote. My camera's not turning around. Isn't it a remarkable coincidence? Almost everyone has the same religion as their parents, and it always just happens to be the right religion. Religions run in families. If we had been brought up in ancient Greece, we would all be worshipping Zeus and Apollo. If we had been born Vikings, we would be worshipping Wotan and Thor. How does this come about? Through childhood indoctrination. I agree with him on that. My parents never believed in vaccination. They never bought into the indoctrination, and I'll forever be grateful to my mother for having protected us from vaccination. But my mother had only a rudimentary education. She instinctively knew what was right and wrong. She couldn't make good arguments, but she knew. If she had had further indoctrination through education, she might not have protected us from what she did. So I'm glad that she wasn't educated in that regard. My father's way of making an argument was bad sarcasm, and schools become our surrogate parents. It wasn't my parents' fault. As they understood, they were sending us to a Christian school. Most people don't understand, that the God who demands human infant sacrifice, the religious belief called vaccination, has managed to subsume, supersede, and override all other religions where it's been able to do so. Peer pressure is a powerful thing. Everyone wants to fit in. Everyone wants to belong. We believe the words of our authority figures, our teachers. What reason would we have to question their words? Why would they lie? Ha ha, you're an idiot if you don't believe. No, actually, you're an idiot because you do just believe. But don't worry, you're normal. What? Exactly. Another reason I believe we come to accept false and anti-science beliefs as sound is because we had it repeatedly drummed into us. Don't judge, don't judge. It's wrong to judge. What's another way of saying don't judge? Don't think. You're not qualified to think for yourself. So we're taught not to think. Because we're taught not to think, we outsource our thinking. We outsource our intelligence. We outsource our judging. We outsource our authority. Because we outsource these things, we allow someone else to judge on our behalf. We allow someone else to make judgments for us. And then we condemn people because they don't accept our judgments that we've blindly accepted, that someone else has made for us on our behalf. Judging should be a process and should involve examination of the evidence and then drawing conclusions based upon your examination of the evidence. Often a judgment should be, I do not yet have enough evidence with which to form a valid conclusion. If you believe you are not qualified to judge things for yourself, if you believe that you are not qualified to think for yourself, then it's time that you took the time to learn, to stop being so lazy and stop relying upon others to do your thinking for you. So others' good beliefs and their false beliefs our teachers, our authority figures, their beliefs that they impart to us, we subsume until when and if we start to question. I had 3 vaccines in my life, to my knowledge. When I was 14 months old, 1978, my hands were scalded. The nurse chased my mother down the hall to assault me with a tetanus. I assume this was a DPT, but I'm told now it could have actually been just a tetanus shot. I don't know. When I was 16, 1992, I'd stood on a sewing needle and went to emergency to have it extracted. I was there by myself and I was given another tetanus. Again, this could have been a tetanus, it could have been a DPT. I don't know. I remember while doing Year 12, I was helping another girl with her English cat. She was doing her assignment as a mother of small children, complaining to an editor of the local paper about unvaccinated kids playing in the playground and putting her vaccinated kids at risk of deadly diseases. Obviously a second-hand opinion. I pointed out to her how her argument was not rational. If your kids are vaccinated and protected, how are they at risk of deadly diseases from unvaccinated kids? I watched the cogs turning in her head for a moment, and then she ran from the dilemma I presented her with. Oh, I don't care, I just want to get this handed in. Of course, I was unvaccinated. All my family was unvaccinated, including my parents, including my grandparents. None of us had ever had deadly diseases. How is it possible for us to pass on deadly diseases that you don't have? None of us had ever had the vaccine schedule. When I was 21, I went and commenced my nursing degree. Being young and dumb and not knowing any better, I went and did what I was told and received my hepatitis B vaccine. Why? To protect me from hepatitis B. Why did I believe it would protect me from hepatitis B? Well, because we're told to believe that, and so we do. Now, I'm sure everyone knows by now that there's no education in vaccination in nursing school. You're simply expected to accept the underlying belief in vaccination. The average nurse has exactly the same amount of education and subject of vaccination as the average Year 10 high school student. If you've done high school, you are qualified to argue with a nurse upon vaccination. If they make an argument of, because I'm a nurse, that's not an argument. I find it so ironic that nursing school has placed well learnt the term evidence-based practice, and yet many practices were simply expected to believe in upon blind faith. I did my nursing degree at Avondale College, a Seventh-day Adventist tertiary institute, and the School of Nursing is underneath the Sydney Adventist Hospital. I lived, worked and studied at the Sydney Adventist Hospital. As students, we worked on every ward of the hospital: emergency, paediatric, monitored medical, cardiac, urology, orthopaedic, oncology, gastroenterology, maternity, labour, intensive care and the coronary care unit. I found it quite interesting to learn that expressed breast milk would be labelled for the mother and baby and treated in the same way that it would treat Schedule 8 drugs, must be checked out by 2 registered nurses. Think about that and then consider what happens when people drink the breast milk from a cow, a completely different species. The milk from the whole herd goes into the same container and mixed up. As a registered nurse, I worked at a very big city teaching hospital, the Prince Wales Hospital in Sydney. I worked on cardiology, ENT, intensive care, psychiatry, and then on an acute respiratory, infectious disease and dermatology ward for a number of years. Infectious diseases being one of our specialties, I had many patients with all sorts of infectious diseases. I had many patients with all sorts of respiratory diseases. HIV was one of our specialties, AIDS was another of our specialties. I had patients with tuberculosis, pneumonia, Guillain-Barré syndrome. I had patients with the one everyone has been trained to be terrified of, polio. And I never came to study the subject of vaccination until after I'd resigned from nursing. And when my daughter was in utero in 2008, I started to study the subject. I had never received the vaccine schedule. No one in my family had received the vaccine schedule. To all intents and purposes, I was unvaccinated. All of my family was unvaccinated, and yet I'd bought the lie. I'd succumbed to the indoctrination, to the dogma that vaccines had saved us, that we'd be overrun with deadly diseases, deadly plagues, if we weren't vaccinated. I'd bought the nonsensical, irrational nonsense that them who weren't vaccinated were skating by on the herd immunity of them who were vaccinated. Studying the subject, examining the evidence, could do nothing until I was first able to address these irrational religious beliefs that were against the evidence first. How were these beliefs rational? I'd worked for years in infectious diseases wards. If anyone had had exposure to diseases, I had. I did not get sick. I'd never had the flu. I'd never had the flu vaccine. If it was possible to skate by on other people's vaccine-induced herd immunity, it would not be on an infectious diseases ward full of sick people, sick with the diseases that no vaccines exist for. It's not rational. It is not logical. I did see my vaccinated colleagues get sick. It took me too long to realise that these vaccine beliefs are not evidence-based. They believed in spite of the evidence. Not because of the evidence. We don't need vaccines. We need health. Health is not acquired through injections of disease cocktails past all the body's natural defences. That is not the way health works. We're not allowed to question the vaccine cult. When I began to make these realisations, I came to epiphanies, and these epiphanies, whilst new to me, were not new. People had come to these realisations long before I had. No one becomes pro-vaccine through meticulous examination of the evidence. They are born into the cult. They are simply expected to believe. And for the most part, people do, because we're taught not to think for ourselves. All the experts that I look up to, that I've learned from, that helped me along my journey of understanding, they all began as pro-vaccine. But then as they examined the evidence, as they realised the science did not measure up, and or their loved ones were injured or killed as a result of conforming and complying to the vaccine religion, their eyes were opened. They began to truly examine the evidence. They learned, they grew, and they spoke. And they were vilified and made into pariahs because they had the courage to speak the truth. I find it ironic the way that mainstream can still use the term, or the accusation, of anti-vaxxer as a means to dichotomise, to polarise, to divide, to vilify. Accuse a person of being an anti-vaxxer and watch them run to make the disclaimer, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. To me, that's a declaration of, I still don't question the faith. I'm still part of the flock. I still believe. I still have blind faith in the cult of vaccination. Please, don't accuse me of not being one of the herd. Still, a blind faith belief that we're not allowed to question. I find it curious the awakening that's occurring now as a result of the global pandemic that was orchestrated for the purpose of inducing desire for a new vaccine. But this vaccine has not been placebo tested. No vaccine has been placebo tested, isn't it? No. But this vaccine is not getting informed consent. No vaccine is given informed consent, isn't it? No. Me, I am proud to stand up and say I am anti-vaccine. I've taken the time to examine the evidence and I reject the demonic human sacrifice religious belief of vaccination. This is another person who realised the vaccine is a religion and wrote a book on the subject. The Vaccine Religion by Waylene James. Mass Mind and the Struggle for Human Freedom. Confessions of a Medical Heretic by Dr. Robert Mendelsohn. He wrote that book in, I believe it was 1979, and so much of what he said then is still valid now. We are supposed to have moved away from the authoritarian parental excuse of medicine, but we never have. Watch how nurses will go into meltdown if you don't comply to what you're told that you have to do. Or doctors. They believe they have authority over your body. Your body is your property. Your mind is your mind. Don't allow someone else to tell you what to do. Doctors and nurses are supposed to be consultants in a team where you are the head of your health, not someone else taking ownership over you. This is a great book. Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, Dissolving Illusions. All these people started out as pro-vaccine until they allowed themselves to study the evidence. There's so many more that I can go on to, but here's where I'll stop. Again, as I said, if anything I've said resonates with you, tell me. Again, if you disagree with me, tell me reasonably, rationally, and logically as to why.